you have a belt and some board. So how mine? We're working on going live. Thank you for your patience. We are live. Thanks. Great. Good morning. I'm the Executive Director of the Public Design Commission, and welcome. If you're joining us via Zoom and would like to testify, please sign up through the Google Form link and also linked on the meeting agenda.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Martin. I'm PDC Chair. Welcome to the Public Design Commission meeting. Today's meeting is being held in person at City Hall. Members of the public can attend and give testimony either in person or remotely. The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda and items number 28605, 28607 to 28619. Please note Commissioner Miranda's recusal from item 28610 and Commissioner Van Bramer's recusal from item number 28609. Are there any other recusals to note? Okay, let the record show there are no other recusals. I'll now call for the vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda. Kenseth Olmstead.
Approve all.
Isabel Castillo.
Approval.
Laurie Hawkinson.
Approve all.
Bill Heinzen.
Approve all.
Karen Keel.
Approve all.
Manuel Miranda.
Approve all.
Susan Morgenthau.
Approve all.
Meryl Tisch.
Approve all. Thank you.
And Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approve all.
And I also vote to approve all. Let the record show all in favor. The consent agenda is approved. Okay, we'll now continue with the public hearing portion of the meeting. The first item is number 28620, which is the preliminary and final review of the reconstruction of stairs at Riverside Park on West 105th Street and Riverside Drive in Manhattan. Per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. We can now proceed with the presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Margaret Bracken from Parks Department Capital.
Morning.
We'd like to present this morning the design drawings for the reconstruction of the existing stairs at 105th Street in Riverside Park. The project was designed by Parks Department Engineering in Bedu. Our total budget is $2.7 million. Please note that $2.7 million is the total budget. That is not the construction budget. The construction budget is just under $2 million. Listed are the city funds that we're utilizing. Through the entire process of the design for this project, we have, can you hear me? Okay. We have worked with the community, with Riverside Park Conservancy, with Community Board 7, with many stakeholders in the area. And also the project was submitted to Landmarks Preservation Commission, who have provided an advisory report and have noted that it's in their mandate to replace in kind. Our goals with this project are to reconstruct the spalled and deteriorated staircase. The foundations underneath the bluestone landings are in reasonable to poor condition. Remove and reset granite risers, repoint ashlar masonry, and also as there is no existing handrail guardrail at the stairs, we propose to install an ADA compliant handrail down the center of the stairway and guardrails on top of the existing cheek walls. Please note none of these exist at the moment, and we plan to use materials that are appropriate to our status as a scenic landmark. Looking at our location, Riverside Park is a 330-acre park that runs continuously from 72nd Street up to 158th Street on the west side. The 105th Street stairs makes a connection from an area we call the promenade, which is the upper level of the park and a passive area of the park, down to a necklace of active recreation areas installed under Park Commissioner Robert Moses in the 1930s. As you can see, we have no flooding issues here. Again, our location, parkland facing the residential areas of the residences of Riverside Drive. Looking at our location, on the left-hand side, you can see this continuous area of active recreation. And on the right-hand side, the more passive area of the park. This on the left-hand side, we list the playgrounds and active recreation in Riverside. And on the right-hand side, those are adjacent parks, parkland and playgrounds. Looking here at the original construction drawings from the 1930s, as I said, this is a Robert Moses era installation, Clark and Rampalana and Gilmore Clark. You can see the symmetry of the two stairs here. So this in the center, we have an arcaded structure, which is one of three in this area, which runs from 99th Street to 112th Street. And this is the sort of Moses era vocabulary for this area, with the arcade in the center and the two symmetrical staircases flanking the arcade. Looking here at the existing conditions, as you can see, we have ashlar masonry walls, the Rockport seam face, which is a brownish granite, and also gray granite. The capstone on the retaining wall and also the existing cheek walls is Milford pink granite. The risers themselves are, again, also Milford pink granite. And the ramps, the step ramps are a natural cleft bluestone, with natural cleft bluestone at the top landing and the bottom landing. There's a landing on top with a random placed bluestone. The bottom, you can see the step ramp then leads down to the run of 5 risers, which run perpendicular to the west. This shows you our existing conditions here. The granite is in very good condition. The retaining walls are in very good condition. The bluestone itself is delaminated, cracked, and spalling. So that is in poor condition. You can see on the left-hand side an existing trench drain, which is halfway down the step ramps. We don't have a lot of luck with trench drains. You know, they're fairly small and they tend to block fairly readily. So that's the existing trench drain. And in the bottom, you can see an 18-inch drain, which is the other form of drainage for the entire stair, which is pitched down. Looking at the underside here, you can see the condition of the foundations underneath. There's some spalling, some exposure of rebar, and on the right-hand side, you can see the broken drainage lines for the trench drain. This is just to note that as we plan to reconstruct both of these step ramps, we would like to phase the work. There's a very active recreation which uses both levels, actually. There's a terrace on top and there's a lower seating area. So in order to continue to provide access for Little League, all of the recreational sports that we have on the lower level, pickleball, soccer, beach volleyball, we would like to retain, we'd like to keep one of these step ramps open at all times. Looking at the materials, we plan to reuse the existing materials. The risers are in very good condition, so those will be removed and reset. On the top, on the right-hand side, you see our typical natural cleft bluestone installation. The ramps actually have a typical pinwheel pattern, and it's more random placement on the landings, top and bottom. This is a recent reconstruction that we did at 102nd Street. This was submitted to Landmarks Preservation and Public Design Commission and approved by both entities. At the time of this design, and as we were working on the design of 105th Street, and when we took it to Community Board 7, our plan was to use this palette that we used at 105th Street. So the handrail down the center is our typical installation that we're installing throughout the park. And as a simple particle handrail. On the left-hand side, we propose to replicate this guardrail that you see in this right-hand image here, which is also Moses era detail and runs continuously along the retaining wall of the promenade. So that was our plan as submitted to Community Board 7. After the Parks and Environment meeting, we then discovered it was brought to our attention that there had originally been a very decorative bronze handrail at this and a couple of other locations, actually at 102nd Street. The upper image here is actually an image of the 102nd Street stairs, which we had completed the reconstruction, as I said, in June of this year. So we know from this image from 1943 that this decorative bronze handrail had been installed in the 1940s. However, my time at Riverside Park and my predecessor's time at Riverside Park, our institutional memory goes back more than 50 years. And there's no indication that anybody remembers ever having seen this handrail here or at any other location. We note that in the 1970s and for a couple of decades after, there was a lot of bronze theft throughout the park. This, the decorative handrail was not removed by Parks Department. We assume that along with much of the other statuary, plaques and bronze installations in the park, that it was stolen many years ago. So we decided to, so having communicated with Community Board 7, they asked us in their resolution that we explore the possibility of reinstalling this decorative guardrail, which we then did. We approached foundries that we work with at Parks Department and also foundries that were listed on other projects. Some of those foundries were reluctant to, to even bid on this project because they saw it as being very complicated. As you can see, it's, I'll move on to the next image because, oh, that's the wrong way. As you can see from the image on the left, it's a pretty complicated design. It's also on a slope and it has this sort of little tail feature at the bottom. So in order to replicate it, we initially have to model it because this is all that we have. We don't have a concrete, an example of this. So in order to fabricate it, they have to model it, which is complex because of the slope and the tail detail. They then have to scan it and they then have to fabricate it. So the estimates that we were given were over $1 million. Over $1 million was only for the fabrication, and this did not include the installation. So at that point, we returned to Community Board 7 and reported in on our findings. They then reinforced their earlier opinion that we should stick with our original design, which is not inappropriate to the landmark status of Riverside Park. Our feeling was we have so many pressing needs in Riverside Park. We have a lot of safety hazards. We have a lot of needing projects in the park. This was not a valuable use of our available city funds. So looking at the right-hand side, this is as installed at 102nd Street. This is our other historic detail from the 1930s, which we have, as I said, continuously along the top of the retaining wall. And what we proposed to use at 102nd Street. Again, having had feedback from Community Board 7, having conversations internally about this, we returned to Community Board 7 for a third visit. At that point, we notified Landmark West and we notified, Community Board 7 hosted a public hearing. We notified interested parties. We heard no opposition to this. At that point, we made the Community Board 7 reinforced their desire that we use the palette that we had used at 102nd Street. And at that particular, the third of our Community Board meetings, we heard no opposition. So we decided internally, as I said, looking at the fiscal situation, looking at the many projects that we would like to complete in Riverside Park, that this was not a prudent use of more than $1 million in this size of project. Going the wrong way. So this is what we're proposing. So we would like to, this is our initial submission. We propose to use to replicate the historic guardrail that we have along the retaining wall. And this is the installation on the right-hand side is at 102nd Street. We didn't install the escutcheon because we felt that that was a little bit more distracting and challenging to order to install on the slope. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you, Commissioners, for your time.
Thank you. We will now hear in-person testimony. If there anyone in person to testify. Yes, I see a hand. Sir, if you could come up and limit your testimony to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jeremy Woodoff. I'm speaking for the Victorian Society, New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual and scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. In a way, I'm sorry to be testifying against my former colleagues at the Parks Department, but nonetheless, the Victorian Society is testifying on this reconstruction because it's part of the Victorian era Riverside Park, an important work of Olmsted and Vaux and a designated scenic landmark. The proposal also raises broader issues of preservation and scenic landmarks and of the review process. We believe that Landmarks Commission should take the lead in ensuring that scenic landmark applications are appropriate and even exemplary before issuing its reports and allowing the project to be brought to PDC. By making only recommendations, Landmarks, the expert agency on historic preservation, shifts the hard work of meaningful design review and decision-making to PDC, an agency whose mandate does not include historic preservation. The Landmarks Commission's report is clear in its recommendation that the original ornate bronze handrail should be replicated as part of this reconstruction project. We urge PDC to follow this recommendation. But we also suggest that PDC look at the railing design as an issue of artistic integrity. The promenade was designed as a complete unified work with features having similar designs throughout its length. As Olmsted himself put it, these works of landscape architecture are single works of art. PDC approved the promenade as such a unified work on May 21st, 1936, when it issued its certificate based on drawings that included the ornate railing. As with any work of art that requires restoration, missing components should be replicated to match the originals. If adjustments must be made to meet modern requirements, these should be made in the spirit of the original designs. It's particularly concerning that the Parks Department is replicating the original bronze railings at the rotunda, but not here. There are equity concerns in specifying the more expensive, but vastly more appropriate design and material at 79th Street, and the non-historic design and cheaper material at 105th Street. Cost is always an issue in the public sphere. The question is how important it is in relation to design objectives. If cost is going to be an issue in PDC's determination, we suggest that PDC require a real itemized estimate for this work, taking account of the actual length of railing and the fact that the molds and details are already available for the Rotunda project. If the Parks Department's current view had prevailed in years past, our city's public sphere would be much the poorer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, in my sign up list, we have Mayan. Megan, sorry. Apologies, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Megan Fitzpatrick and I am speaking on behalf of Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee has continued to review this proposal as additional original drawings have come to light. We are disappointed that as stewards of the scenic landmark, the Parks Department continues to propose non-original utilitarian railings for a functional and ornate designed element of the park, such as the 105th Street staircase. The main explanation given as to why the alternate railings are instead proposed is cost. While cost is always a factor, it is never supposed to be a consideration with determining appropriateness for our landmarks, whether within historic districts, interior, individual, or scenic. We also would like to point out that despite the many times this came before CB7, it was never before CB7's Preservation Commission committee, which it should have been, since this is a scenic landmark and there is a long-standing precedent for joint committees when landmarks overlap other committees. The original condition is known and well documented. As previously stated before the community board and discussed with Parks, our committee sees this not only as a landmark issue, but an issue of equity. Parks can readily replicate the proper railing detailed in the original material at the Rotunda at 79th Street, but is hesitant to do so for this application 26 blocks north. Our committee strongly believes there is no excuse to not reinstate them in any location where they were originally designed for, but removed from when undertaking restoration efforts. This is especially poignant because in this instance, where the lesser rails are being proposed is a portion of the scenic landmark park which abuts streets with a lower overall medium income than at 79th Street. Additionally, on page 18 of the presentation, the applicant compares an approved guardrail reconstruction within the park at 102nd Street with a utilitarian guardrail on a retaining wall outside the scenic landmark as justification for the choice of material and design. There are different criteria for reconstructions within scenic landmarks. The rationale without proper information sadly led to an intrusion at 102nd Street. We need not replicate the mistake again, especially now with that the full documentation of the original condition came to light. To further our sentiments, we found the LPC advisory report stated our views more clearly. And I quote, "The Commission finds that the historic guardrails that were removed prior to the designation of the scenic landmark were significant architectural features of the staircases and scenic landmark, and that the proposed guardrails will not replicate or closely recall the historic guardrails in terms of material, design, or details. Therefore, the Commission staff recommends that ornate bronze guardrails replicating the historic guardrails be installed instead of the simply designed black painted metal guardrails. There are other options to consider, such as alternative materials or a delay of action until appropriate funds are identified. Our committee is glad to see the restoration of the pavement stairs and that safety measures are adhered to with new handrails. There is no equivalent need to rush the wrong guardrails now, which would create permanent damage to the original fabric.
We have reached 3 minutes. Please wrap up your testimony.
This guardrail has been absent for too long, and it's now the opportunity to restore it as designed and intended. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Natasha and Susan. Okay, next we have Michael Workin. I'm following the order of the sign-in sheet, but I will ask Frampton if he would go. But otherwise, I'll go with the order. And if Natasha and Susan could just go next, because that is the order, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
I have to. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Natasha Kazmi, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Parks and Environment Committee at Manhattan Community Board 7. And I'm here with my colleague and fellow co-chair, Susan Schwartz. We want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. We are speaking in favor of DPR's application today and the design that they have presented. DPR came to Community Board 7 back in January of this year, and they presented the design that they've shown here today. It was unanimously and enthusiastically approved in committee. It was also approved the following month at the full board meeting. They came back to us in June.
I've paused the timer, so yes, when you start again, I'll restart.
Thank you.
No, that's fine, no worries.
So DPR came back to us in June again with details of the bronze handrail. And after a heated discussion with the public and within the board, we still, Community Board 7 in committee, still reaffirmed through a vote to approve this original design. In September, during the committee meeting, DPR came to us again with a revised plan. Again, after some discussion in committee, and there were no public members available or who came to the meeting to speak for or against the plan, we once again reaffirmed the original plan as presented by DPR. So the community board is made up of a lot of members who live in the neighborhood, who know this area very well. We have spoken 4 times through a vote in favor of the original plan that DPR has submitted. We also want to speak in favor of all the work that DPR is doing in the north side of the park, since the issue of equity has been brought up. I want to mention, a lot of work above 96th Street, such as the, there was a major drainage study done from 108th Street to 116th that was presented to us in May. And DPR is coming back with a final plan to implement that study against drainage issues. They're coming back to us tonight for Dinosaur Playground, which is also above 96th Street. And they've also, the area around 110th Street has been paved. The area around 97th Street has been paved. Brand new pickleball courts have been opened around 110th Street. So actually a lot of work is being done above 96th Street.
We are at 3 minutes. If you could wrap up your testimony, please.
Yeah, we believe that the original design as presented is certainly appropriate. Spending an extra estimated $1 million on a decorative bronze handrail is not only unnecessary, but it's also financially imprudent at a time when the city is very stretched. So for all these reasons, we request that you please approve DPR's plan as submitted to you today and as approved by the board 4 times. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Schwartz. I was appointed to the community board in, I think, 2016. It's a volunteer position. It's purely advisory. But it's very, 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 very frustrating when we have repeated meetings and people don't come when we've done a tremendous amount of notice to let them know we're discussing these topics. And as far as it not being heard by the Preservation Committee, I was on the Preservation Committee for 3 years. And I have to say that I'm not on the Transportation Committee, but I care deeply about transportation issues. And I go to the Transportation Committee meetings when they have topics I'm interested in. So I'm very frustrated and envious, frankly, of the PDC that you actually have something more than advisory superpowers, if you will. I'd also like to say that I'm an avid bird watcher. My colleague Natasha is sick of hearing about this, but I use the parks all the time for bird watching. Yes, I'm one of those people. However, in the spring of 2022, I missed the entire spring migration because I tripped and fell in Central Park on some bluestone that looks like that stuff and had a broken kneecap. I was out for 8 weeks. I'm a grandmother. I'm an older person. I'm already terrified in the parks because of the bicycles. Please approve this after this long, long delay and just let us fix it. It's $1 million. It could go a lot of other places. And I really resent the implication that there's an equity issue here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Michael Gorkin.
Thanks. I had some handouts for some people who are going to be speaking next because they're get here. So there's not on there. Thank you. Hi, my name is Michael Godkin. I'm a landscape architect. And again, like Jeremy, I'm sorry to be here testifying against people I used to work with at Central Park Conservancy, whereas Nancy knows I was one of the people that did a lot of the iron work and metal work and recasting of bronze out of different materials. So I'm very familiar with the costs. Actually, costs to do that kind of work have come down because of 3D printing, CNC machinery. So I don't want to get into too many details, but a lot of us in the business questioned the cost that you were quoted. A lot of the metalwork that looks like bronze that you see in Central Park is actually cast iron, which has been patented. And that would be very, you know, I think no one would have a problem with that here. I know Landmarks Commission allows replication in different materials as long as it can look like the original material. My main point is, after listening to everyone, and that these railings are not just like ordinary, they're extraordinary. If you look at the third picture, you'll see they're like a beautiful spiraling newel post that you'd see in a fine home. The ornament is incredible. It's up there with Paul Manship. In fact, it looks very much like Paul Manship, and I included some Paul Manship pictures at the back for you to compare it with. I was responsible for restoring one of the not the physical work, but, you know, specking one of the Paul Manship gates restorations in Central Park. There was a big fear that it would be stolen. That hasn't happened. Margaret told you no one remembers the rails. I remember the original railings. They were there until 1974, right on the cusp of the city's financial crisis. And they were removed because, in fact, there had been a rash of bronze thefts in the city. That was 1974. This is not 1974. That was a very bad decision where the city did triage, basically. They stopped maintaining parks in what were considered marginal neighborhoods and outer boroughs and concentrated on the main parks like Central Park. And the park suffered neglect that they're still suffering from. So let's please not repeat that kind of mistake. And let's give our all to this park. These are simple pipe rails. They are inappropriate. The park has a very distinct design vocabulary. These stairs are meant to be very intimate and elegant. The pipe rail was to be used, and I have a picture of that also. I think it's 2 or 3 in your handout. The pipe rail, as you see here, goes along the promenade. It's a very muscular, heavy kind of feature. The stairs, I don't want to get too much into masculine, feminine stuff, but the stairs are a lot more elegant, sinuous curving, ornamental. These ornaments were really the crown jewels of Riverside Park. Anyone who grew up on the west side might remember them. I grew up at 74th in West End. They were down there. You can see they've left the old holes here, and when they drilled in the new ones, you can see where they were very clearly by the old
You've
holes.
reached 3 minutes. If you could wrap. up
Okay,
your
I will
testimony.
wrap up. Thanks a lot. I would urge you to support your fellow commissioners at the Landmarks Commission and ask that Riverside Park reinstall the railings, get a better cost estimate out of a variety of materials that'll look like bronze to bring the costs down. And that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Frampton Tollvet. Apologies if I didn't read that right, from HDC.
I'm going to ask that you unmute.
Great, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, commissioners. Frampton Tolbert Historic Districts Council. Historic Districts Council is the citywide advocate for New York's historic neighborhoods, buildings, and public spaces. We are here to support our partners, including Victorian Society and Landmark West, to urge the Public Design Commission to compel the Parks Department to restore the original railings at Riverside Park's 105th Street staircase. We are disappointed to see that the Parks Department has proposed a utilitarian railing for this location. We urge the PDC to heed the Landmarks Commission's advisory report, which was previously read by Megan from Landmark West. So I'm not going to repeat the findings from the Landmarks Commission's advisory report. In the face of such advice, Parks has cited cost as a reason it is hesitant to restore the original railings, but its costs seem somewhat out of scale with the scope of the project. All New Yorkers have a right to the city's public parks, and all New Yorkers have a right to enjoy the park's beauty. We ask the PDC not to approve utilitarian railings at this location. If the railings cannot be restored as part of this work, we ask that they be removed from the project and decided on at another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna, is there more remote testimony?
I see some other attendees in the waiting room. If you are trying to testify, please use the raise hand feature, which should be in the Zoom toolbar. It looks like we have one additional person who has signed up in the testimony form. There's a George Calderaro. Is that person present? Seeing and hearing none, going once, going twice. Okay, I think there's no additional testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. I will hand it over to Commissioner Deborah Martin.
Okay, commissioners, are there any questions or comments for the presenters? Pardon?
Do you get to vote twice on both for each side?
No. Please.
If you could all speak into your mics.
So just have one question regarding the fact that
Hang on, I gotta take this one.
Take that one, Lori.
so at the moment, there is no ADA compliance on this stairwell. And the handrail as proposed will include the middle rail, which will make this stairwell ADA compliant. So if we were to hold on this today, that would be many more months that people who need ADA compliance would have to wait.
I think that's a question for Parks.
Yeah.
Also, just a note, George Caldero is actually on Zoom. He was having a issue, so he can testify, but Nancy, would you mind holding or just responding quickly, whichever you prefer?
Yes, that's true. That's this handrail, the handrail for ADA that's down the center will allow a lot of people to use this stairway. Yes, yeah. As well as the fixing up the all the bluestone pavement.
And there is no way to make this central rail compliant with any previous design because there was no previous design for a central ADA compliant rail.
That's correct.
So the only way to harmonize one with the other is to make the rail on the side and the rail in the center the same.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, are we allowing testimony? at this
Yes,
point?
sorry, Deborah. Yeah. Yes, George, if you could unmute. It was a hiccup on our end, so we're going to allow this testimony. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm George Calderaro, a board member of the Art Deco Society of New York. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. The Art Deco Society of New York would like to comment on the reconstruction of the staircases at the 105th Street Field House in Riverside Park. The Field House, together with related structures on the linear promenade of Riverside Park, was designed in 1937 in the modernist style of the day and became a grand popular feature of the park. Unfortunately, the bronze railings were removed in the 1970s during New York City's fiscal crisis. While the Art Deco Society is delighted to see the railings are being replaced, we cannot support the current ahistorical design of the proposed replacements. The lost ornamental bronze railings were part of a cohesive design that included grand staircases, paving, light fixtures, and other ornamental features. Their replacement should match the original modernistic design. Instead, the Parks Department is proposing to replace the ornamental originals with standard steel pipe railings. We understand that surprisingly, the Parks Department's approach in a similar project at the 79th Street Rotunda, also in Riverside Park, is to restore the foliate scroll stair railings there. Why shouldn't the same care be taken at the 105th Street Field House? The railings were designed by the same artisans at the same time and in a similar style. If the handsome bronze details are being restored at the southern end of the park, then they should be restored in the related structures in the northern part of the park. The Art Deco Society notes that the city's Landmarks Commission has issued a report that agrees with our position. We hope the Parks Department will reconsider its decision and do the right thing by the 105th Street Field House. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So my question is, if you could describe the engagement process that DPR undertook in connection with this restoration.
So initially we have community meetings, as I said. Oh, okay. Can you hear me? It's on. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Initially, we meet with the community. We have scope meetings and we meet with the community and get feedback from the community. In this particular case, we work very closely, in fact, with all of our projects, with the Riverside Park Conservancy. So we engage with the Riverside Park Conservancy in all of our construction work, our capital work in the park. In addition to that, as pointed out, this makes a physical connection to many areas of active recreation. So it's an essential access to those areas of recreation for all Upper West Side families. We also have, as mentioned, a concession at that location and 2 public restrooms. So these, other than being beautiful architecture, are really essential parts of our parks infrastructure. Does that?
And can you discuss the presentations that were mentioned earlier to the community board?
Yes, so initially we go to the community board, we present the design. As previously mentioned, this was the design that we presented to the community board. At that stage, being unaware that there had been any different previous installation there. Prior to while they were working on the resolution, we were then notified that this decorative handrail had originally been installed there, which is when we stepped back. They modified their resolution to recommend that that we explore the fabrication of this. We then, as mentioned, we went back 2 additional times. One time to discuss where we had members of the preservation community who attended via Zoom, and then a 3rd time where none of those people attended and nobody spoke in opposition. I should also note that the Rotunda is a $160 million project. That is a DOT managed project, as a much larger scale project than what we're proposing to do here. There are many materials that we're proposing to use there that we were probably unable to install in other areas of the park. And even at that location, there are certain original features that we're unable to install because they don't meet current safety standards.
When you were at the community board meetings, did you observe that they were open to public testimony?
Absolutely. Community Board 7 is always open to public testimony. The meetings are via Zoom, so it's much easier for people to attend. And there is always public testimony, and there's always ample time given for public testimony. And we heard, as I said, the second of the 3 community board meetings, we heard extensively from the preservation community at that particular meeting. The 3rd meeting, in spite of being invited, we heard no further opposition.
I have one more question for you regarding ADA compliance. What percentage of the population will be further enabled to use this park? Or I don't know if you have numbers regarding what number of people will then be allowed to use this park by putting in this ADA compliant rail?
I'm sorry, I don't have specifics.
I don't think we don't have those kind of numbers, but I am a 64 and I really value handrails on stairways now and for some years. So it's a significant proportion of the population. New York City is getting older, and so we really value this ADA improvements in accessibility of both the condition of the bluestone and the steps and the granite, and the ability to take a handrail. We've done it in Morningside Park, Fort Tryon Park, really lots of neighborhoods with lots of older folks or people who need that extra support.
The funding for a project like this, it is all city money?
I believe so, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have some private funding for some stairways in Riverside Park.
Has there been any thought? I am very mindful of all of the issues here. Has there been any thought to raising some private dollars to meet the interests of the preservation community?
I'll repeat it. Yes, we have talked. First of all, we also talked, first we talked to council member Gail Brewer. And Gail Brewer, which hasn't come up at all, and I'm surprised at that, was very amenable to finding more money. She said she couldn't do it on a spot notice, but she did. I'm surprised she's not here today, and her assistant Shula. And then there's, as I mentioned, I mean, I'll say her name. Maybe I know she likes to be anonymous, but Lisa Schwartz, because she's friends of friends. And she is a great philanthropist. And she, as Nancy said, she's been doing a lot of the center rails that you see here, not the guardrails, which have nothing to do with this, but the center rails. And she's also very interested in replicating ornament, which she has done on her own ornate mansion on Riverside Drive. So we have actually been reaching out.
I'm not, we do have donors contributing to the park, but I have to say I'm not familiar with Lisa Schwartz, and she has not contributed any funding to any of our ADA compliant rail installations in Riverside Park, which I work on. So, I mean, we would certainly be open to talking to her, but she's not somebody that we are at all familiar with.
It's not typical that Those who testify from the public can make a comment, but because it happened, well, if you could keep your response
yeah.
brief.
No, I just wanted to talk about Gail Brewer. It was brought up that she is very interested. Gail Brewer did attend our September meeting. She had a lot of questions to ask about the project, but she made absolutely no commitments, absolutely none at all. I just want to clarify that. That was it. Yeah.
And frankly, she was surprised that there was no one there in opposition, and we were too.
I think in general, it's not helpful for people to comment about what an elected official might have said. They can speak. Gail Brewer can very well speak on her own behalf.
I have one more question, and I just want to know from start to finish in terms of getting approval from the local community board, which you're now bringing to us. How long was it from the design that you now bring to us to make a decision?
I think we probably lost about 6 months. Would you say, ladies? I think January. So from January, more than 6 months. So from January to here we are.
But that's the whole design process, or that?
That's the approvals process.
Right. So the whole design process, including approvals for the community board, how long a period of time is that?
1 year.
Okay.
So we were towards the end of the 1 year when we go to community board. We go to community board 7, we then go to LPC, and then we then come to Public Design Commission. So I would say we were about 9 months into that final approval. The engineering have generated the construction drawings. You know, once we finalize our approvals, we're ready to move to the next step. But we've pretty much been on hold for the last for the last few months while we resolve this issue.
My final question would be, if we were even to consider to another design that we wouldn't know actually how to make, which no one knows how to make, although there have been some ideas thrown out about how one could go about that, it wouldn't be a faster process than what you've been through before, and you would have to duplicate the same relationships with the community board again.
Correct. We would
Okay.
then be revising the design and resubmitting to all of the entities.
We would be making a situation that would be at least another year's delay, right?
I don't think it would be a year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there
But
has been.
but based on a
conversation
process that
about-
nobody's detailed, we're just spitballing here based on we don't know, because no one knows what it would take to make this rail, though I do take it into account that maybe 3D printing could facilitate a faster access, maybe.
No, that was the part of our estimating was based on modeling and then scanning. And we don't have, in spite of references to the rotunda, as I said, that's a DOT managed project. They have a completely different specification set up. They have, you know, multiple bronze items in their specification. So they have done no work. And I check with them on a regular basis, and most recently last Thursday, to see if they had moved in any way towards getting estimates or to fabricating this design, and they have not. That schedule completion for that project is 2025, and it is well behind schedule. So, you know, there's no assistance to be had there.
I don't really want to discuss this other project because it's beyond the scope of this, and also I think not that useful. You don't have access to it. We don't know. We can't see it, and so we can't get into the detail of that. Let's keep it on this particular item.
Commissioners, Lori?
So I lament losing that beautiful spiral corner. It's really, really beautiful. I agree. Although the handicap issue is paramount. It's really paramount for the community. But I do want to say to Parks that I would hope in the future, because I also lament the black painted handrails all over our world. And I think there are becoming materials available now. And I respect some of the information that's been brought here about it's actually not 3D scanning the existing handrail, it's actually 3D printing using materials, you know, that we could replicate this. It's not going to be bronze, but it might stand in for the painted black. And also, I think one of the things that's happening here, I think there's a higher requirement, if I'm not mistaken, because it looks like it's a little taller. Am I mistaken? Is it up higher than it was in the
curved version before 1970, the height has changed, right? Correct. But the ADA requirements have changed since this was done. Yeah, we're missing the turn, so people can't grab now. They have to grab the stone.
So
Right.
that decorative bronze was never meant for hands. It had like a razor back on the top.
Right.
It was along this and probably
Okay.
to make the cheek wall a little higher,
I
so
see.
you wouldn't feel you fall over it. This is the handrail we're adding for 8.
No, I know. I love that. Perfect. I'm talking about the one that's on top of the
Yeah,
stone
that's really
here.
for
Okay.
falling over.
No, I
rather
know
than-
here on the left where you don't have the curve any. I'm looking at the old version.
Yes, yes.
Right, that you're replacing, that is gone now. And so when you replace it, you're going to have a piece that's straight with a vertical piece
Right.
that's higher, I believe, than the older one because ADA requirements have changed. So the proportion, everything's changed,
At least a foot higher, but
or a few inches. Yeah.
Yeah. about
The-
to say, that.
So,
that
I mean, I
detail is
think we have to
a foot
acknowledge
higher.
that it's right.
That this is easier to tumble over. As
ADA
opposed to that,
didn't
which is more-
feature into this rail.
It
to
did
falling
not?
over, no, because it's not used as a
But it-
handrail.
but-
It wasn't.
It's not even falling over you. There's a height for your hand to go on too.
Yeah,
Right.
this rail meets the height for your hand to go.
Okay.
So the ADA feature is the one down the center.
It's in the center.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
and that's
Okay, I just wish, I mean, I'm all for the ADA. I'm gonna vote for this thing to happen right away, but I'm just, since I have you in front of me, I'm gonna say, I really wish we could explore new materials here in the future,
Mhm.
right? So I think it's due diligence to our constituents to ask those questions, that's all. Commissioner Brady.
I just had a question for Parks about LPC. I'm trying to understand, right? LPC had an opportunity to weigh in here in a binding way, but issued recommendations. Is that correct? Okay. No, the recommendations are just recommendations, right? Advisory here. No, I
Yeah.
know we are, but they right, I feel like they punted a little bit here, but okay, but yeah.
Just for the clarity of the conversation, the piece that was quoted at $1 million, was that a recreation of the very ornate stanchions and spiral at the bottom with bronze, as well as the ADA handrail in bronze?
No, that's the guardrail being bronze.
Just the guardrail with the ornate, the
Yeah,
original
yeah,
ornate elements?
Yeah.
And then the idea behind that quote was that the ADA guardrail would remain as painted still.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And was there ever a recommendation or exploration of alternative materials that brought the cost somewhere in between?
No, but for this job, I think the materials will be a portion of the cost. A lot of the cost is replicating it, designing it, installing it. And for this short section of work.
Because it doesn't exist, right?
It
So a
doesn't
designer
exist,
would
yeah.
need to evaluate the historical drawings and make their
Not like-
best assessment. So in the end, a rebuilt rail will likely not be as accurate to the original because there's no way to
Uh,
confirm that.
There's a lot of information to work with, photos.
There is,
yeah,
okay.
But that's a lot of the work.
Wes,
No.
one more question, which is, would it be possible to separate out now that we learned that the part on top of the curved stone is not ADA? It's not a fall issue. Could you just do the center rail now?
Do you know, we did discuss that at the office, and given that we have this fall protection other places, the engineers and the landscape architects were not confident with leaving that item off. It's the code applies to building egress, so there's not a code that applies here. But given that we had looked into this and there was a rail, we didn't feel comfortable. It's a professional judgment of leaving it off.
All right. Yes.
And just just to one final question, based on some of the other commissioners' questions, and I understand 79th Street is not a perfect comparison, but just to be clear for the record, at 79th Street, there are no exact replicas existing of what this rail looked like in bronze.
No, it's the same thing. It's photos that they would be working from, and drawings.
Thank you.
All right, I will now call a roll call vote on item 28620. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote. Ken Seth Armstead,
Approve.
Isabel Castillo,
Approve.
Lori Hawkinson,
Approved.
Bill Heinzen,
Approve.
Karen Keel,
Approve.
Manuel Miranda,
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau,
Approve.
Meryl Tisch,
Approve.
Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approve.
I also vote to approve. Let the record show that it is a majority in favor of approving the project. I will note that there has been a request from Commissioner Hawkinson that DPR take a look at materiality in connection with these kind of railings, and we'd appreciate if you could come back to us and let us know what you find. But this project is approved. Moving on to the next item, it is Ready?
Yes.
Okay. We're ready to move on to the next item, commissioners. The next item is 28621, the preliminary review of the construction of a pavilion at the Queens Botanical Garden on 4350 Main Street, Elder Avenue, between 134th Street and 136th Street in Flushing, Queens. Per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. We can now proceed with the presentation.
Hi.
Please.
Morning, everyone. My name is Evie Hansopoulos. I'm the Executive Director for Queens Botanical Garden, which is a 39-acre oasis right in the middle of downtown Flushing. We are very excited to be here today to present plans for an outdoor pavilion that is designed by BKSK, who's done a bunch of work at the garden. We love them. And our hopes is that this pavilion will help activate an area of the garden that is very underutilized, quite beautiful, but it will be a way to kind of draw people and also allow us to realize our mission even more deeply. So with that, I want to get to the experts over here. I'd like to introduce Joan Krevlin from BKSK, Eben Singer, also from BKSK, and I'm sure many of you know David Bryant, who is not with BKSK, but works for DCLA. So I'll hand it over to Joan. Thank you.
Yes, right.
Hi, apologies, we have no audio.
Joan Krevlin, BKSK Architects, and here is our site for the 1,500 square foot pavilion for the garden. And I was just saying that I like to look at this image because it's always helpful, I think, to put the garden in the context of this sort of greenway that extends from Flushing Meadow Corona Park to Casena Park. The garden, of course, is a legacy of the 1939 World's Fair. The origins were from that original World's Fair. It was relocated here in 1964. So it has a long history, and that continuum is important. This is a plan of the garden and the pavilion, and I think there's probably a laser pointer on this, or no? I'll use my hand. This is the location of the pavilion right here at the western end of the site. And it was located here in great part because first from its proximity from the parking garden, which is where people who are coming through car will arrive. The main pedestrian entrance is here. And the visitor administration building that we built almost 20 years ago is at the top of the page. And the new education building is right here. It's out to bid right now. We're very excited and we're very grateful for our PDC Design Award. Thank you. We're very proud of that. But what the pavilion location does is, as we begin to activate first this northern edge of the site, and then with the new education building, the southern, it will draw visitors as a focal point, as a destination, and I think most importantly, as a place to this very underused location on the site. And it's actually kind of a lovely spot on the site. So we're very excited about what it will do for the garden. I'm going to go back over here. I think it's probably better. These are just showing the main paths to the site. And this is the main path from the parking garden. This is the main path from the most activated eastern edge of the site. Our education building is here. So all paths essentially lead to this location right here, which is going to be our main access to the pavilion. These are just some photos of the site. I invite you to meet us out there anytime. It's quite lovely. And it's very hard to tell the kind of sense of place that the trees behind our pavilion location make. It's a very kind of surprising
sense of place. Again, I don't think the photos do it justice. So this is a plan which is now rotated. So the pavilion location is here. And in this case, north is to our right, right? So we're rotated just to kind of reorient you. And one of the things that we wanted to show with this site is that that collection of trees that you see behind is actually a very kind of strong presence of trees and makes a very nice place on the site. So when we were designing the site plan for this, a couple of critical things. We saw the opportunity to do an outdoor covered roof structure as something that was two-sided, had a very public facing side where the number 1 is. That could be for very large gatherings, you know, under the large roof, but also draw a lot of people. And on the
education center and the pavilion at the same time?
The education building is a DDC, is a city-funded project being overseen by DDC. That's out to bid right now. This is a state-funded project on its own schedule, and they will happen overlapping. They're very separate projects.
But they'll be overlap. The only reason I ask is because it looks like you're going to be tearing up, you know, space to do the construction. It would be a pity to tear it up.
They're located in very different locations.
It was hard for me to tell, but
I'm going to do it real quick. So the education building is over here.
Right.
And the pavilion is over here.
Yeah. And the access points would be
back this way, and we'll back along this kind of service path here.
I have to say, as someone who has gone to many weddings at the Bronx Botanical Gardens in that pavilion, I think it's a great idea.
So we basically have a two-sided structure so that we can have smaller gatherings, more intimate galleries that's connected by, that's going to be enclosed by the existing trees that are there. And then the more forward-facing open roof that will allow for larger gatherings. We have some images of that in a second. And the path, there's a main path number 3 that will come off of the existing path structure that leads you as an accessible path to our stage, which our platform, which is located 1 foot above grade. And you can connect front and back if you're using the smaller side as backstage, essentially, for something happening in the front. And then these lighter paths are to allow for accessible path for somebody who wanted to get to the lawn where people are seating in a wheelchair or because they needed more steady ground. So we have 2 smaller paths that bring you to the lawn area to make it welcoming for everybody. I'm going to talk about paths briefly because there was a lot of questions that you all raised. There was a question about why we didn't have more of a continuous loop and more paths. And the structure that we have here grows directly out of the garden's kind of goals to, one, have a position of, if desired, a kind of welcoming node that could perhaps limit access to the smaller side in the back if there was a more private event happening, also to get information. And one does walk through the rain gardens on this side. One can continue as a loop around, but we very much want to keep this side landscaping and not add yet another path. The garden has many, many paths and needs kind of, in many ways, more planted landscape areas. And the other thing I want to say is that there is funding. That's the next project for a pavilion garden. And that's intended to happen all around in this back area. So that funding has been secured. It will go through a DDC process. So there's opportunity to further develop this from a landscape point of view as a next project. This just shows the ability to get power to the site. We know where existing power is. Yes.
So you put accessible seating on one side, but you would anticipate that there will be a need for selling on the back side as well.
Well, so our feeling is that everybody can get on this, on the stage here, and the path is wide enough for somebody to pull in on a wheelchair in the back if they want to, but it won't be as full a crowd. So we didn't need to, so here we did these pullouts.
So there, you put pads here because they're further away, and because of intimacy in the further the back space, you wouldn't need a pad because they could be on the walkway.
Yes.
Okay, but
This
then
one-
you'd haven't widened the walkway.
Yeah, though I think that
Do you understand the point I'm trying to make? That like if you expect people who are ADA compliant, needing ADA compliance on the front side, there's more space, so you put a specific pad there. But if you want them to use the walkway, that means that people, then they're in the walkway,
Mhm.
and the walkway hasn't become wider.
Mhm.
So that's a kind of a conflict.
So we could look at adding another kind of pullout for the same way we did on this side and add another pullout so that we can accommodate everybody, as you say.
I just want to remind commissioners in general that we will let you complete your presentation and there will be lots of time for
Sorry.
questions after public testimony.
Okay, I'm also happy, if that's however you want to do it, I'm happy to take questions as we go. They come up. This just shows the studies that we did, and we did quite a lot with the garden. You can't see there's tables. This is showing school groups having lunch or having workshops or doing projects, tables and chairs underneath here, a smaller group. I think there's about 100, Evan, I'm going to forget my numbers, but there's about 100 people in the front and maybe 60 or 30 in the, I'm sorry, I don't remember my numbers, but smaller groups in the back, a classroom in the back, 2 classrooms in the front, or lawn seating, as we were just talking about. So if there was a performance or an event, it could spill out in the lawn. But the goal was to kind of really accommodate multiple kinds of programmatic functions that the garden already does. It's really just giving home to these functions that they do. This was our original presentation to you, the one that was, you looked at a conceptual. I'm going to jump to the current one where you all asked, or the comments were to see if we couldn't lighten up the structure. So we've been working with our ultra high performance concrete consultant and our structural engineers. And what we were able to do in this iteration was the basic structure is 5 columns and these beams that kind of hold this roof. We like to call our structure the canopy, because the idea is that it's really trying to mimic in some ways or be responsive to the fact this isn't a garden like a tree. And we're very happy about our beams branching out. There's other drawings you can see sort of lightening them, and they kind of V out. So they feel more like tree branches in many ways. And the columns, the other feedback we got was really hoping that the columns we could make visible the water that was coming. So one step back, I'm sorry. The garden, this is our 4th building at the garden. In every building we have done, we have centered water management and as a design element. So here at the low point of the butterfly roof, the water will come down, it'll come through the column and be brought out to the rain gardens that flank it. And one of the comments was, could we make the rainwater more visible? And we're very happy to say we have been able to do that, so that when it rains and you'll see it coming down and it's brought down visibly, you'll see another drawing through the columns and then to the rain gardens on the side. The back screen is also made of the same high performance concrete. It's perforated. We'll be taking an image of the tree canopies there and perforating it, because the idea is to have the front and back have some separation, but not have a hard edge. We want to be reminded that this is really not an edge, not a wall to the garden, but a piece in the garden. And so this is showing its relationship to some of the other structures. This is the visitor center building, where it's characterized by this large welcoming roof, and then water falls down visibly at the edge and has a water system that connects throughout the whole site. Our new education building is also characterized by an overhang large roof, and these folded planes of these welcoming roofs are part of the language that we have adopted for this new structure to sort of tie it into the vocabulary that's already on site. The education building has a whole range of sort of water management strategies, particularly in the back where the water is run through a whole rain garden that is crisscrossed by walkways. So central to the experience of these buildings is always water management, and we're trying to do that here as well. This is the previous one. This is the current one. So you can see here in this elevation, it might be a little clearer to see it, the splaying out of the beams so that they are lighter and they're a little bit more branch-like. We're pretty excited about them. And the ability to break the column into these 2 halves, again, which lightens it, but allows water to come from the low point, which is here, through a rain chain that will bring it down into the ground and the rain garden. The structure, because we were trying to have a column-free structure, except for these 5 columns, there's a lot of force being taken at this moment. So I think there was asked, could we have fewer columns? No, we need all our columns. They're really doing a lot of work for us, but we like how they feel like they're part of the treescape of this garden landscape. And this you can see, this is a bird's eye view. I think it's hard to read, but this you can see the low point where the water comes down into the columns, and you can see it running down the column on the right. Oh, that was the old one. Sorry, this is the new one. And here you can see the introduction of these rain chains, so that as the water comes to that low point, there are these rain chains. We actually are using the same ones over at the Ed building. So again, there's a continuity of that language. So the water gets brought down in a controlled way, so it doesn't just blow everywhere. And it'll be through the columns and into the ground to the rain gardens. We've been working with RKLA Landscape and again, wanting to kind of anchor this in a landscape so it doesn't feel like it just sort of landed. And so we have our lawn area here with the path running through it, a mixed higher grass that just kind of holds it and frames it just to kind of collect it in a way and hold it. And then the rain gardens, which are on either side, which will be a different kind of landscape that is intended to manage the water as it needs to get absorbed into the ground. This is a planting of the rain garden mix. And again, been very careful knowing the maintenance issues for the garden. This is a similar plant palette to what's already at the Ed building. So the gardeners will be familiar with the planting. We have a significant number of rain gardens being planned for there. And this is a mixture of the tall grasses, again, similar kind of palette to what's on the other side. This is our materials. So we have this ultra high performance concrete, which is a precast concrete. And it's kind of it's steel fiber reinforced so that you use it's got compressive and tensile strength that traditional concrete doesn't have. It's super strong, which allows you to use somewhat less material in the making of it. Precast, it'll be brought up here from Virginia in large pieces and installed on site. The stage will be an exposed aggregate concrete, and then two paths, one that'll be concrete and one that will be a combination of aggregate and sort of the little rubber sort of pieces for permeable paving, which are the ones that go through the landscape to have them be more landscape and a secondary kind of hierarchy. And then the screen in the back, again, this is an image of a canopy, you start to read, will perforate it and it will reflect the landscape that's there. So I'm speed talking because I know I have time and I speed talk anyway. So I'm happy to take questions.
First, public testimony. Is there anybody in here with testimony? No. Okay. Is there anybody signed online, Jenna, for remote testimony?
I don't see anyone who signed up online. That being said, there are people in the waiting room. So if you would like to testify, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. It should be in your toolbar. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Seeing none, I think that there is no public testimony. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. Okay.
Commissioners, questions?
I might have missed this, but two questions are, could you explain the function of the wall behind the performers?
Yes.
Is that just a convention? And then is this space, is there already like a sense of programming for the space?
Yes, so the wall is intended to act as a backdrop if there's a performance happening. So it's not a hard wall, but it's just a screen behind so that there is something of a backdrop. It's also intended in both cases, given that our goal is to have this be having two scales, it's not trying to be one space, it's really trying to be two distinct spaces. It gives an edge to it. I think it's very unlikely that scheduled program would happen simultaneously. So it's not trying to be a sound barrier, but it's really trying to be a placemaker in many ways so that if you're on the west side, I don't like to say backside because I think it's also a front side, but the west side, you have some shelter, you have an edge. It can also act as a backstage for things that are happening on the main side so that if there's performers waiting to come out, they have a place to be behind and they come out. So did you say it's an invention? Yeah, we invented it, but it's convention. No, it's really just to give it kind of an edge. And programming, the garden already does, and Evie, you can correct me, but they do a lot of public programming that includes performances and dancing, voice. They do a lot of public programming that include school workshops, training workshops, teaching workshops. So the idea is to have, they use their covered space very intensively. So the idea is to make a different kind of covered space here that could have a more performative aspect to it, while also just providing coverage for everyday activities like school groups doing work outside and sitting on a hardscape and having some shelter from the sun or some shelter from the rain.
So, okay, quick question. So I mean, I think the lightening and the thinning of the material is very beautiful, the way you've lightened it up and worked with engineers and the tracing underneath with the columns for the beams is very beautiful. I had a question about the screen between, and I was wondering, I didn't realize it had a pattern on it. Number one, it looked like it was just hard to see. When now I can see, when he zooms in, I can see. So, but I'm wondering if it should be lifted up. I didn't ask this before, but now I can see it goes, I don't know how close it goes to the ground. I'm just thinking about leaves and dirt.
I think it will be, I think you're right.
Water be going underneath. I mean,
I think it
needs a
will,
dimension, yeah.
I think it will be lifted up. I think it's not drawn that way, but I think it will be.
Because it's supported, what does it go into a channel or something? Or
It will be clipped. Yeah, it'll be
Clipped.
clipped on the sides. And I think you're 100% right. I think that it's not drawn as though it will be, but it will be lifted. So it really wants to almost be a gentle insertion. So water and leaves can move through
And
it.
do you think it should, I mean, I don't know, extend beyond, I mean, I understand, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, we've drawn it that way. We're worried about budget. We
I'm
have,
just worried about somebody running into it or.
well, so we
something.
have
The
it.
edge,
So
that
sorry, we did
edge,
extend it.
the
We
one of
extend
the-
it. We do extend it beyond.
Yeah.
Because it gave it a little bit more of reaching into the landscape, you know, as
Yeah.
opposed to it being, you know, a hard edge. And so, and I'm sorry, I can't go back now, right? Is that
You
right?
should be able to.
I don't know why I'm not. If we go back to the plan for a second. It extends back ever so slightly just to kind of reach. I don't think, I mean, we'll have to work this path around it right here. But it feels a little bit more engaged with the landscape when it shifts, when it's not, it's a half panel. And it will just hang off that edge, just to kind of give it a softer edge.
And the material again is metal.
No, it's all this, it's all ultra high performance concrete.
It's reinforced
all-
fiber concrete.
It's this, it's all one
It's all
material.
yours.
It's
Okay.
all, the intention is for it to be,
So its thickness is,
it's about 2 inches.
okay,
There's, yeah, it's not like a hard metal plate.
yeah.
It's
right,
about 2 inches. Yeah.
Right, okay.
I had some questions about the water vapor gap at the bottom as well, but I figure you'll experiment with how that works. And actually it's going to be a little bit of trial and error as it starts to accumulate moisture, because you're accumulating in the winter and in the fall months, you're going to accumulate a lot of moisture in the drainage at that point where it reaches the ground from the columns that bring water down. So the concrete in the middle is going to expand, contract pretty quickly. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. So I'm concerned about that water vapor gap. But then the other thing is just on the aesthetics of content. And I wondered if you could consider in your design a removable panel for discretion. If you were going to use it as backstage, it'd be very difficult to use it as backstage because you've made a lens. So whatever's on stage is going to then be perforated, and then people are going to be way more interested in what's happening behind if it's concealed. So as a performer, it'd be a negative for you if you're doing performance there and the people backstage are actually part of your content. So I wondered if you could incorporate a temporary way to put a barrier so that you're not extending the landscape when it's necessary. And I don't know if you think that's possible, but it also could just be fabric or something like this, but specific to the need. And then you're not organizing the programming, but it seems to me that the program is going to have to be very carefully organized about how both front of house and back of house might be programmed. And then, of course, users are never knowable. So I don't know how that's going to work out. And the last thing I would say is that in regard to making it like the trees and making this partition, if it weren't there at all, then there could be a temporary partition, which would make a big blockage. And then it would be just open to the landscape. It might make it a more flexible space for users, because you can't anticipate. I mean, if you're anticipating performance, the performers are going to be limited by your creativity on the front end because you've created this biophilic over determination. Do you know?
I'm going to take your things in order because
I know this is very long. I'm sorry. That wasn't quite a question, as a ramble. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine. So the first one, the water, I'm going to talk about, we're keeping the water. We're always aware and worried. I just wish those into one word. Concerned about what happens with water. So the water will be piped. It will be free as it comes down the rain chain. It will then go into a pipe, which will take it to the rain garden so that it doesn't get blocked or it doesn't, we don't have freeze thaw issues. It's gonna be, at that moment, there's a gravel base there, so you read the line of the water, but it's not gonna be open water there because we want to be able to control what happens with the water. Your second question had to do with the,
If there is a design.
right, so.
If
I'll
there's a
start-
design element for a temporary barrier to remediate if somebody doesn't want to see through.
Which leads me to your third one. But I think that's an interesting suggestion. And I think that's something that's worth us having a conversation with the garden about. Where there be times, because I do think it's something we've thought about a lot. There is something interesting about the full permeability of it, that when it's just happening, it's just fully open and you see the landscape behind. And that's of real interest. And I think that you're going to your second comment about we've been very specific about what it is. It doesn't go to the ceiling. It doesn't do a lot of things. I think that's worth discussing internally with the garden and with us. And I think that could be a good solution to that.
Also, I just wanted to commend you on what I think is a really beautiful design that's elegant and that really does, in a complex way, use this space and create a lot of the it's exciting space that I think people want to perform in. And that's why, like, I know something is good because I start having language around it. And so then I started thinking about, like, if I were performing there, what would my issues be? And I think that getting in the design process, those people now will allow you to then exponentially grow how it is dysfunctional without any extra cost, how it will work for people. Yeah.
It could even be a cost saver. So I think that's a very good suggestion. I think we'll take that up among our team.
So as the unofficial Queens representative on the PDC, I just want to say I still live in Queens. So that makes me the unofficial Queens representative. I didn't leave. So
whoa.
So first, let me just say I love this project. I love the activation of this particular part of the garden, right? I love this garden. Evie, you're doing a great job for the garden and for Queens. I particularly love the canopy. I think it, for me, is evocative of the architecture throughout Flushing Meadows Corona Park, right? So much of which is a legacy of the World's Fair and the theme of the 64 World's Fair. So I feel like you're consistent and you're paying homage to the World's Fair and this particular important part of the history of Queens. So I just think it's great. Really excited about all your buildings, including the education building, which I can't wait to see done. But I think it's beautiful. And I think when you've gone to this section in the park in the past, in the garden in the past, you know, it screamed for activation in some ways. And I think this is the right treatment. And I love that so much. I really do. I think that's going to be such a boon for the garden. And, you know, Evie and your team, you do so much programming already. And really, really cool stuff happens here at the Queens Botanical Garden. So I'm very, very confident that you'll be able to utilize this space in a way that's going to be really, really tremendous for the people who use the garden. So congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, commissioners, if there's no other comments, I'll set, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to, if you don't mind going back to the site plan, I just want to be able to discuss the circulation in a little more detail, both as it relates to the day-to-day experience, the event experience, but also water. So starting with water, I understand it's all coming down the rain chain. It's going into a pipe under the big pebbles, and then it's exiting on either side, right?
Number 5 are both rain gardens.
So the number 5 on this side, I see how it would work, right? The water comes down a pipe, and it inundates that whole space. On the other side, that circulation moment that comes perpendicular to the space divides the rain garden in half. So how is water sent to either side of the rain garden, and how is that visible to the public?
So the rain garden, this will be piped to get to this side right here and this side as well. And this side, I don't know if this side is fully, do you, Kevin, is this calculated in? Yeah. Underneath, right? So that, because we're already bringing the water to the rain gardens intentionally below grade so that we're not trying to do a rain channel that's visible. But what you'll read as visitors, you'll see this is where the kind of pebble zone is, and you'll understand, and you'll see the rain chain, and you'll see the rain gardens, which are designed to manage water.
Yeah, and I think on the left side, again, that relationship is a little bit clearer, but on the right side, I find it to actually not be intuitive at all and to be a bit of a weak point because there is an opportunity to teach the public how this comes out, even if it's hard pipe, which is something very common that you do. But you don't really see the relationship. And it is because the path, number one, is it's concrete, right? So it's not lifted. You don't see like the void beneath that's bringing the water down. And two, that perpendicular portion really cuts off the relationship of the channel to the garden, as opposed to on the left side where that relationship is they're next to each other. So I think there's a bit of a potential for refinement on that, where you make that relationship more evident. It could be that geometrically stays how it is, but maybe you have a perforated floor that allows you to see the pipe underneath. So one experience is different than the other. But I think there's something missing there that creates that immediate connection, especially thinking about botanical gardens as being places for education. Not everybody like us understands the whole connection of rain collection to garden. And I think having it more visually apparent would benefit that narrative. The second comment is that I fully understand how the circulation works from an event perspective and how you're trying to collect people that are in the audience versus people that are in the backstage. But again, that point there on the right becomes a bit of a weak point on the day-to-day, in the sense that if I decide to go around that path surrounding the trees and end up on the backside of the pavilion, that little piece of wall sticking out and that lack of visual connectivity makes you not intuitively perhaps want to turn and come back out. So I'm just wondering if there's something that can happen there with the geometry to make it more fluid and increase your point of view as you're doing this, to see that there's a circuit, that there's a path that you can continue as opposed to turning around. So I think it's just that,
I think those are all, that's all very perceptive and a good point. I think we can look at kind of the material, this little landing right here is a place that we do need to study better. It could be that it becomes a metal grating, it could be a wood boardwalk, it could be a different material right there, so you understand, that the water is happening differently there. I think that's certainly something we can take a look at and perhaps grow it, so that it feels a little bit more of a transition point as opposed to just a straight path. We're happy to take a look at that.
Yeah, I think growing it would help significantly.
I think that's a very good point. Thank you.
If cost estimating comes to be an issue, but not cost value engineering, let's use that terrible word. I don't think the project would be terrible if the screen were gone. And I think because it's, it has the bones that are very strong and very beautiful and very light and all the things you're trying to achieve. I know you know that, but you could even just have eye hooks or something where somebody could attach some PVC or something material that could provide a backdrop for temporary, because then you would, this issue that's being brought up here, you'd see right through it. It's very beautiful.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to move on. We're very much behind unless anyone has a burning comment. Okay, I'm going to summarize quickly and make sure that I've captured your thoughts. I want to start by saying that we all find this a very elegant addition to the garden and appreciate your responsiveness to early comments that came back from committee. So thank you for that. The three main comments that came through are, one, having to do with the screen, which to be studied, its relationship to the ground plane, the opacity of it, and then the very existence of whether it exists or not. And we'll suggest that you study that, which you've already said you will. The second comment had to do with the relationship of the water on the north side and the visibility of it, perhaps through perforated floor or whatever, so that the understanding of the rain garden can be clear. And the third comment has to do with the intuitive nature of the circulation. To just take a second look at the circulation here. So commissioners, is those three comments more or less? Okay, great. So then I will now take a roll call vote on item 28621. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote. Ken Seth Armstead,
Proof.
Isabel Castillo,
Approve.
Lori Hawkinson,
Approve.
Bill Heinzen,
Approve.
Karen Keel,
Approve.
Manuel Miranda,
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau,
Approve.
Meryl Tisch,
Approved.
Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approve.
I also vote to approve. Let the record show that all commissioners approve this project and all are in favor. The project is approved. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, great. And the installation of Through Thick and Thin by Risa Puno at the Mary Callie Dalton Recreation Center, adjacent to the Lions Pool at the intersection of Hannah Street, Murray Halbert Avenue, and Tompkinsville Esplanade in Staten Island. Per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then the commission will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. We will hear in-person testimony first, followed by testimony from remote participants. We can now proceed with the presentation.
Good afternoon, still morning. Good morning, commissioners. Hi, I'm Kendall Henry. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Public Art at Department of Cultural Affairs. And before Risa and Miguel give the presentation, I want to give you a bit of background as to how we ended up here today. As you notice, we have two artists in one project. This is a rarity for us, but whenever the opportunity arises and a request from the agency and the community, we select two artists. As part of our process, prior to our selection of our Percent for Art program, we go to the community board first and introduce them to us as a program and invite them to participate in our process. I also recommend artists and panelists to be part of our process as well. This started a year ago, or over a year ago now, in April of 2022. 2022, when we have our first artist selection process by which we selected Miguel. And being that we wanted this to be a collaboration between two artists and the design team, one working primarily outside with a larger facility in mind, and the other really working with the community. One, Miguel was selected for the outside and Arisa for the inside. So yeah, starting in April 2022 with our first panel, we selected our Miguel in June of 2022. Miguel sat as a voting panelist to help select Risa. Later a few months after that, and in November of 2022, we had both artists. Prior to this meeting, we had community board introductions of the preliminary designs. Both were well received at Community Board 1 in Staten Island. Okay, without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to, I think, Miguel starting. Okay.
Do we have the artists on Zoom?
Yes, hi, how are you? I am here. I think I just need to be able to control the screen.
Oh, control right now. Let us know. There. Great.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right. So my name is Miguel Bracelli. I am originally from Venezuela, and I've been based in New York for a few years now. Now, literally in Provincetown for an art residency. So that's what I'm here remotely. But first of all, I would like to introduce part of the work that I've been doing about similar research in different countries, about part of my own project and practices, and then how this is also translated and engaged with this particular place in Staten Island. This was one of my first projects when I arrived to the US. It was in Baltimore, where I lived for a year, in collaboration with City Hall and the Office also of Immigration Affairs. We raised a flag, but in this case, this flag was made of strings, multiple strings, trying to communicate the diversity within national identities, and also to replicate the military ceremony. But in this case, it was with many forms that you cannot fold and unfold perfectly, about how the vision that I have about nations and migrations. In different countries, for example, in Chile, in the border between Chile, Bolivia, and Peru, we work with a high school nearby in the area, recreating the Pacific War, but changing the ending, burying the flags in the sea. And for me, burying the flag in the sea, it was a poetical gesture, but also a political act, trying to understand the connection between xenophobia and nationalism, and frame this also as an educational project. And with similar subjects and approach, but also in New York, we did this project in Davenport Park, creating this flag that is all over the place, all over the ground, multiple held by multiple people. And then we bury the flag again as a different kind of anti-nationalist gesture. So I've been related with landscape and places in different ways, not only through these collective performances, also with installations, and always trying to engage people or the landscape itself. These two were in Caracas, one ephemeral or temporary, and this one permanent. I always keep the material of the performance and then transform these things into sculptures. I like to call these sculptures books with the used materials of the performances. Books to read with the body, all books of lineal jars, of lineal traces. And the last project that I would like to talk about is this one in Guadalajara, Mexico, where we did a replica of the monument to Benito Juarez, but we display it horizontally. And we have a whole class about monuments today, about what to do with them. So we moved this monument to a park nearby, and the monument were transformed automatically into a playground. I would like to end these images, because I think the core of my project is the relationships that we build about these projects, and also how this is framed as an educational project, as a learning experience and an experience for exchange. So it was a big challenge when I received this commission for a permanent work, and how to translate all these ideas and visions into a permanent sculpture. And now we are in Staten Island, where the project is located. This is like images of the context that you already saw in the public design presentation for the architectural project. Here is also present Kokolakis from the constructor, but also like the architecture office, Icon 5. So if you have any question about the architecture project, I think they can answer that for me. In the meantime, I will go back to the main proposal. In this case, like this was like the original concept with that was awarded in the first in the competition with a jury and the community. Finally, we start to talk about the project itself. The title is Fable Ecosystem. Fable Ecosystem again address the idea of a flag, but in this case, it's a flag made of branches, trying to understand the connection between nature and national identities. What happens if we learn from nature? Nature has no borders, and these have like different, more organic ways to relate and build. So I was to translate this idea of like of nature and national identities like to a flag. I was also interested in nature because of the place itself, but not only in the scale of a Staten Island, also in the scale of the architecture. This is an image of like the architectural project with the name, the title of Garden of Wellness, with all these terraces that you will see in the renders. But also like these green terraces is kind of like the way that you can see a Staten Island when you're approaching from the distance in the ferries. Like this is like simple images that I took in many visits to the place. And once you are like there and you arrive, you start like to see all these icons. And I was fascinated by the tower of Lions Pools, because also it's important to say that this new building is kind of like an ampliation or a complement or something that it is an addition to the historical building of Lions Pool in Staten Island in the waterfront. And I was thinking about how to connect with this icon. And I noticed also like the symbol of parks. So that triggered the idea of like a flag made of branches, and also how to connect with Mary-Carly Dalton, that she was like this person well known as the chief of magic to make everything possible, but also she was like well known for welcome everyone. So the idea of a flag made of nature for me embraced that idea. One is like the welcoming part, but also especially this idea of like this magical element, like this fable element that is a flag made of like nature. So we have like the image right now. Now it became like green, and we're exploring like green and brown colors. And this is how it is implemented in the place. It's important to say that it's structurally connected with the building. I am an architect by training, so it was nice also to go back to this experience and to collaborate with like Icon 5 on this project. It is like born out of a column, and then it could be connected here through a beam if it's needed. So it will be extremely attached to the main structural like building. And hopefully in conversation with the tower again, and creating this symbol that can unite both projects, the old complex and the new complex as a one single campus. And this is the floor plan where you can see that the flag has its own thickness. And it will be like burning somehow for one of the terrace and over the garden, and it will be seen like from different areas and places from the campus. So that was very important for me, how to create a symbol that can represent the campus itself and can be seen from different places. And especially also how this symbol can be seen through the landscape of Manhattan and Brooklyn behind. And here we are in one of the terraces of the building, and probably will be one of the most iconic views. And in terms of fabrications, material methods, and color research, I already talked about the colors, green or brown. And we're exploring like metallic elements, that it could be bronze, aluminum, or marine steel. We're also exploring different type of fabrication methods, like 3D printing versus like casting real branches, and also how like these branches should be connected or recollected or addressing like the trees that are in the place. And if you can see all these trees and nature that is around, also like you go back through the origins and they come from many different places. So I think it can also reinforce the idea about this connection in national identities, borders, symbols. And now also we're thinking, if this move forward, hopefully, how to connect with the community in a way to transform this into a participatory project, something that I've done before with like many other like proposal, and I like to think that it's at the core of my practice. So we're in thinking about ways to invite the community to bring their own branches and start like to create like an open call to that, and find like a cultural partner to do that, and hopefully like the flag or the sculpture can come from like this project. And this is the last image that I would like to end the presentation with. It's a very important image for me. It's more like a concept right now. But it's how to design an icon, a symbol that it could state the presence of like Staten Island as one unique borough and its own like presence in New York City, staging these to the other boroughs. But at the same time, I was trying to think for an icon, because this is very close to other like big important icons as the Statue of Liberty, how we can understand these symbols today. And for me, this flag made of branches also address these subjects that I talked about before, about borders and immigration. And I think this is one of my favorite things about being here in New York City. And I was hoping to create a symbol that can address what I think is like one of the most important parts of this city. Thank you, and I will pass along to my colleague, Risa Puno.
Thank you very much, Miguel.
It's a combined presentation.
Oh, is that on? Okay. Hi, I'm Risa Puno. I'm an installation sculpture artist, and oh, cool. Yeah, that's me. And I've been based here in New York City for the last 19 years. And so just for context, some of my previous work, this is a project called Infinite Play. And it's a climbing structure that I made for Franconia Sculpture Park in Minnesota. A lot of the work I make is playful and fun, like these intersecting balance beams that were commissioned for the New Children's Museum in San Diego. I try to make work that serves the community that it's sited in, like these interconnected picnic tables and benches with different mosaic patterns that I made for Rufus King Park in Jamaica, Queens. I make a lot of interconnected objects and shared spaces. There's actually a link to the video in the corner if you ever want to see this six-sided brownstone stoop in action at some point. I sometimes think of what I make as monuments to community and feeling like you belong. I believe that objects like this can symbolize our collective experience, helping us to connect to and understand each other. This project is called One from Many. It's what I made during my residency where I learned to cast iron with the John Michael Kohler Art Center in Wisconsin. This project is called Associated Impressions, and it was my cast brass thank you note to all the Kohler factory associates who had a hand in helping me make that big cast iron pan. And those are actually their enlarged fingerprints. Getting to know communities is one of my favorite parts of my process. And this is a project called Year of the Dog for Chinatown Park in Boston, where I collected stories from the community and engraved them directly onto the blocks, which is similar to this piece that I made for a small town in Arkansas called Come By, where the panels illuminate where you come close, revealing stories, poems, recipes, and drawings from people in the area. And the shape of each panel was cut to match the side-facing silhouette of some of their faces. So moving on to this community, Tompkinsville in Staten Island, where I learned is a neighborhood with many different cultures. Here is a rendering of the beautiful new building on the left. And the red circle is where the lobby and where my artwork will be. This is the reflected ceiling plan of the second floor of the lobby. And this is an elevation view that shows the two-story lobby with the spiral staircase. My artwork would be installed at the top of the staircase, that diagonal cone shape there above the red box, that's the opening for a skylight. And I'm hoping that my work would be able to catch the light from the skylight. And so this, as you know, is the original proposal, which you've already seen. And so the working title for the current version of my project is Through Thick and Thin, which is an expression that has come to mean unwavering support or loyalty. But the phrase actually comes from a description of entering a forest through thicket and thin wood. Through Thick and Thin is inspired by Mary Callie Dalton's compassionate dedication to the residents of Staten Island and the resilience of the Clove Lakes colossus, a giant tulip poplar tree that is one of the largest and oldest organisms in New York City. Visitors are invited to look through translucent panels reminiscent of tulip tree leaves or petals, each incorporating different community members' facial silhouettes. These panels collectively represent the tulip tree's protective canopy and bright flowers, symbolizing care, joy, and community. This artwork serves as a tribute to Mary Callie Dalton's vibrant legacy, bringing people together in the spirit of Staten Island's Chief of Magic. And I've had the pleasure and privilege of getting to know more about Mary Callie Dalton through the stories of her friends and family. And the more I learned about her, it really does seem like she's the fitting namesake for the new recreation center. Mary was known for her caring nature. She actually lost her home during Superstorm Sandy, and I learned that she still managed to gather 40 other parkies and helped distribute suitcases of supplies to the community amidst all of that. And she was all about serving the community, whether it was something simple, like giving away half her sandwich every day, or even just knowing what you need, even before you realized you needed it. I honestly wish I had all day to tell you the stories that I learned from all of her friends and family, because I could fill up the whole day. But she was known for bringing people so much joy through her creativity. She had a whole storage container of costumes. She was known for being a colorful person, both inside and out. And this is the Clove Lakes colossus, the giant tulip poplar tree that I was talking about. This particular tree is thought to be over 300 years old. And tulip trees in general are known for their adaptability. Coincidentally, so is Mary. She was known for saying, you got to do more with less, and you're only as good as your best plan B. The tulip tree is not resilient alone. Tulip trees are known to be part of important plant communities. They're more resilient by helping each other, much like Mary. Tulip trees are an early successional species, which means they're fast-growing trees that shoot up and form a dense canopy quickly. They provide shade and shelter for other plants. And being the first one to jump in and provide protection and care for others is definitely something that Mary is also known for. Which is why I want to focus on the canopy of the tree because of its protective qualities and because of its particularly beautiful flowers. Showy flowers on trees are pretty unique. And these bright, beautiful tulip tree flowers remind me of the fun costumes that Chief Dalton was known for. And so for this project, I want to use layers of colorful translucent materials, either safety glass or acrylic, so that when you look from below, you see something that looks like a tulip tree flower, which again, there's a link to the video in the corner if you want to see that from different views. I also want to collect different facial silhouettes from different community members, like I did with my project in Arkansas, and use those silhouettes on each piece of flower or leaf. That way all the faces can come together to create one image like a community and can be mounted in different planes. And that way different shades of green can give a nod to the many different cultures in the area. And so this is a basic rendering of the second floor of the lobby where you can see the opening for the skylight. And this is a drawing of how the artwork could be installed. And I like the idea of catching the light from the skylight to throw color down to the first floor of the lobby. And because changing the color of the light makes sense to me because Mary changed how people saw the world. I also really like the idea of throwing colorful light down to the first floor so that there's some visual interest down there, since we can't put artwork down there because it's a flood zone. And that way people, as they enter the building, it sort of hints to the exciting classes that are up above, so that they can already get excited as they start to ascend the staircase. Here you can see a close-up of the reflected ceiling plan, where you can see the circular cutout at the top of the stairwell, as like that you saw in the previous rendering. And this lobby is actually pretty huge. And I know this isn't like a huge budget for permanent public artwork. So as I'm talking to the fabricators about different material options, my goal is to value engineer the project to try to get as much coverage as possible to maximize the visual impact. Here's an option that shows how each panel could be a little larger with more leaves. What material we end up going with will put different constraints on the possible sizes and shapes. This is a dream option where I find a really good deal on materials and do all of the beautiful line calculus to do all of the logistical factors where we can cover the whole top of the stairwell. Because for me, outside of trying to give the city and the community more bang for their buck, the idea of filling up the space would really fit the concept because that's how tulip tree canopies grow. Plus, I think Mary's vibe was very much like the more the merrier. And so I get the impression that she would want us to include as many community member spaces as possible, but obviously we'll have to see. So in the preliminary design phase, I hope to explore different shapes for the various components. Depending on the material in the process we go with, the shapes might end up being more detailed like this, or more simplified to help with things like logistics and budget. Color palette will be inspired by tulip tree flower blossoms and leaves, but the exact colors will depend on what materials we use. Some materials only come in flat colors, others allow for full color gradients and more painterly options. Again, we'll have to see. But here are some of the basic options that we're considering, but as I talk with fabricators, I'm realizing that there are way more variations than just these. But things that we're thinking about are weights. But the architect said that they'll build the ceiling to hold whatever weight I need, and whatever mounting method. So that's great. I'm thinking about safety, like how it would react on impact. Color fastness, does it have the longevity for permanent public artwork where it won't fade? Lighting, how will it look during daylight, and how will we light it during cloudy days and when it's dark, and making sure it doesn't block the functional lighting of the building. And so when we shared this with Staten Island Community Board 1, we also included a form to start collecting contact information for people who might be interested in participating. I also plan to create an online form for people to submit photos, but I would also love to conduct in-person workshops if possible. I've already discussed partnering with Staten Island branch of New York City Parks, of course, because that was Mary's team. Also Staten Island Urban Center, since they're very plugged into the Tompkinsville community, and they've been longtime advocates for the rec center. Yeah, so basically, I just really want, through thick and thin, to embody Mary Callie Dalton's legacy of community, care, and joy in an artwork that brings people together and adds color and playfulness to the space. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now take public testimony. Is there anyone in person? Jenna, is there anyone remote for public testimony?
No one has signed up at this time. However, I would like to give everyone in the waiting room the opportunity to use the raise hand feature if they would like to present testimony. Seeing none, I think that there is no public testimony online. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, questions, comments?
I go.
Yes.
First, I just want to say, Teresa, the explanation and walking us through all of it was probably the best of any artist that I've seen so far since I've been on the commission. The thought process, it was just all so clear, and the way you tie Mary's legacy into all of it and the community right down to their faces is just beautiful. And also the way you talked about how the community would experience it, just incredibly thoughtful and beautiful. With respect to the flag piece, I thought also it was a remarkable image. But there seemed to be some dispute as to whether it would be green or brown. And I love Parks Green, but I had a much stronger preference for that when it was brown and not lime green. So I guess I'm just wondering what's the thought process around that, and who's going to decide what the ultimate color is going to be.
Yeah, right now, like we're thinking about that. I don't know, like how does it work, like legally? If it's like the artist, it's like the core review, it's a community. So I will pass that to the people in charge. Like for me, both like projects work well, so, like both colors. So I'm open to any of those. But I don't know if it's like literally my preference, or it's kind of like a core review preference, or it's like a community preference. But yeah, I'm open to any of those colors. But also what I would like to like also to express as an artist is like, for me in this particular project, I think it's not about the color at all. I think it's about the form, and it's more, and I think that's what I have like, it's very open-ended right now, because it's more about the branches and how it's like one single color, and the textures and things, it will be more about the branches and more about the form.
To follow up, so potentially this is like the community is going to vote on their favorite color, or?
No, I'm just saying that I don't know if like if it's legally I need to decide by my own, or it's a core review, or it's a community thing. So my only point is that I'm open to be green or brown, and also my opinion as an artist is like this is more about the form and than about the color.
Yeah, and so Miguel, we're gonna let you make the first decision, and you know, because you're the artist, and we'll follow through. But yeah, it'll be Miguel.
Thank you. Kensa, it's you. Okay, it's Miguel's decision, but sure.
I'm a big fan of Riza's work, so I'm just a big fan. So I don't know if I could be critical, but I'm gonna try. And I don't know Miguel's work at all, but I really love this proposed object. So I'm gonna address Miguel first, and I'll come to Riza and my questions and comments, etc. For Miguel, I understand you can model it with an engineer to figure out the structural loads and all that stuff, and we put that in. Preliminarily, I was concerned about that, but now that I'm moved past that and I know you can handle that, I'm concerned about whether or not this thing is going to be stationary or whether it will move, and how that conceptually affects the community around it. Because if it moves, you're not going to, like, the images that we got are all from a fixed perspective, and I'm just wondering what view the prevailing wind will make it move. If it moves like a weather vane, one, that will probably make it easier to deal with the structural load, but two, that means that which view the public is going to get will change day to day. So I'm wondering if you think about that as a conceptual option, that it could move, and that when that moving happens, was that what that means for the piece? And then also, I wasn't sure about how, one of the things I liked more about some of the other works you did was that the flag itself was this longer, sinuous thing that kind of almost felt unending. And here you've had a very strict limit because of the load bearing of it all. And I wondered if there was some play there for you in terms of how wide and how long the flag is, and whether that's something that comes into mind. So that's for Miguel. And then for Riza, I had another kind of set of questions about building a canopy, and whether or not that, when you're building that canopy, whether or not that canopy could become part of the flow dimensionally in the space as you use the stairwell rather than a skylight. And if you could work in, like, it seemed to me conceptually, the branches of the tree aren't represented, but rather than have these leaves suspended, there also is the extension that the branches could hold the leaves. How could the branches hold the leaves, and how could they be multiply connected to one another? Because that is also part of this concept of this person, Mary, being connected, and that these things aren't individually held by nothing, they're held by something. The tree is a form. So I wondered if you could extend that as a way of moving it into the space, playing with that light, and thinking of it early on so that you don't have a cost detriment later. Yeah. So those are my two areas of inquiry for both of you. I don't know who wants to go first.
So, Miguel, why don't you take that first and we'll give Risa a moment to think about her answer.
Perfect. And thank you for like bringing this image, because I think it's a good image to answer that question, which I do appreciate, because I think it's a very good like observation and connection with my former work, was something that I was like very interested about, how to translate that openness, like the fluidity of the forms to a permanent sculpture. In terms of like how fluid, long it can be. This is kind of like an approximate right now, but we will determine this, like try to encompass like a utility, like form, aesthetic, structure. The past few months basically has been about like reaching out engineers and fabricators, more than 10 of each. So I have like a very good like approach about different perspective. And some of them actually, they think that yes, like if we make this flag to move with the wind, that could be like an asset. Some of them thinks that we don't need to do that because it also will be like transparent with all the forms. But I think like, or we've been thinking about the possibility of moving, and if that is the case, I think it will be more like a range of movement, but it will be always like in the same position or looking at the same side. I choose this particular side, as you can see in this image, because it will be like over the garden, and I think it's a good angle with the angles of the main floor plan and the terrace and the fluidity of like these terraces. So that was like the decision or the criteria behind the position of this flag. And I think if it's moved, which it sounds reasonable, but also scary. I think it will be an asset for the project, for sure, conceptually, because then it will be more like related with the landscape, more organic and more fluid as my performances. But since this is not a performance and it's like a permanent work, I think it will be like a range of movement if that's the case. And probably we can find like a good solution that doesn't require the movement of the flag. But definitely will be like the main thing that we will need to figure it out if this goes to a preliminary phase, because then is where we end up like working directly one-on-one or shoulder by shoulder with an structural engineer and a fabricator. I think this is also a good image to say, even regardless to the final dimensional proportion of the flag, I think it is designed as a piece that is also like very open in its shapes. It's not like a rectangular flag. It is kind of like, it will be moved. I mean, it will be fluid in the way of like, there is no particular border or frame. So I hope that can translate the idea of like past projects to this entanglement of like forms and branches, that I think like conceptually also can address like many of the subjects of in New York that I want to highlight here for Staten Island.
I just want to hit back with one question, which is that in terms of the structural load, the main thing is the permeability of like, if you're 60%, 30%, or 20% in terms of the permeability. So it's like, if it's 50%, you know, it's obviously a lot less, but in terms of wind, but I think you need to kind of come to that pretty quickly, so that because you need someone to calculate the numbers of how much wind it's going to catch, so that you can figure out how long it's going to be, right? Or that is some part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And so far I've been working with some like fabricator and structural engineer in New York, some of them in Miami. What I was interested is like working in Miami, they work with like a minimum of 180 like wind loads, and the minimum of like New York is 120. So I think like that's kind of like a subject that I have in mind, and I understand what you're saying, that it needs to be like transparent enough to go with the wind and move and flow with the wind, but also with a density that you can see all the complexity of the branches. But the only way to do that is like start working with a structural engineer shoulder by shoulder. But what I would like to say is like I can totally understand what you're saying, like as an architect, but also as an artist in terms of form. And that's something that we will need to figure it out in like working on that. And hopefully also like with like many branches, but thinner, that also like will help to create this volume and this presence, like and the possibility to let pass the wind.
Thank you. Lisa, would you like to respond to Consent's question? And I know that Mary Valverde, Commissioner Valverde has a question following your.
First of all, yes, thank you. And 100%, like, especially if I had all the money in the world, I would absolutely love to do that, because I think, I do think that the branches and the idea of Mary being a connector would be an absolutely beautiful analogy for that, and would absolutely solve all would make a beautiful thing for how to hang the panels. I think it's a tricky balance because the budget is tight. Right? It's like if they're panels, I mean, it's also tricky because if glass is much heavier than acrylic, right? If we go with acrylic, it could be hung like aircraft cable, something like that, right? Which, and also then helps us maximize the number of panels, because if we start doing things like, welded aluminum, welded steel, or even like cast aluminum or something like that, then we start really eating into the budget that we can do for panels. And so though then the thing is, if we start maximizing the number of panels, then it needs more structure to hang it, and then increases the installation time, and then increases the equipment rental needed for it. So that's what I mean about the calculus of trying to figure out and it's also like, is all of this with one fabricator who's doing, because if I'm working with one fabricator for all of it, then it's a little easier to work that math. But if I'm working with one fabricator for the structure, one fabricator for the panels, and one installer, then that's even harder to do that math for. And the more complicated and more like the structure is, the less likely I can work with the same fabricator for all of those. So that's my only tricky thing. But if I had all of the time and all of the money in the world, I love that idea and I would chase it. Absolutely. And so that's where I'm just trying to work on those compromises, but I love it as an idea.
I just wanted to throw out that, like, because I face a similar thing, many projects, and people tell me, oh, it's X amount. And so sometimes, like, if you went the route of Plexi, then it's possible that in your own studio, some of that could be hand cut. And then that reduces the outside fabricator pricing. And so like I had a piece, and just to start at, it was 100,000 for one element. And then somebody told me, oh, but if you used aluminum, you could cut it like wood. And that meant that I cut out 100,000 in the budget, because I took that piece into my studio and I hand cut it all, which meant that I had aches and pains, but I did get a piece done that would have cost $200,000, but I got it done. And, so that's what I'm, like, because I can just send you a DM anyway. I'll DM you. And then, we'll talk about creatively how to attack it. But I also don't think that everything has to be cast aluminum and all that in order to get this idea that this connection happens. That also could be hand fabricated, and that with stock parts. And then you're all of a sudden bringing the cost down. And so we'll talk. And if you are amenable to it, then I'll talk to you about. But I think creatively, to extend it into the stairwell a bit would allow you more dimensionality, would make it a stronger piece, like the tree you're forming it on.
I would love that. I also think it would be just nice for the rec center to have more of that presence.
Mary Valverde, go ahead. You have the floor.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Miguel, I really appreciate your design. I think it's very beautiful. I love the texture and the organic linear qualities on the flag. I originally, when I was looking at the preliminary images, I was concerned about the size and the whether it was large enough from a certain distance, front or back of the building in terms of the perceived size of it. But I think now that you've explained and in terms of the technical aspects of the work, I understand why the size is the size that it is. The only thing I wanted to comment in terms of aesthetically is that I would prefer the lighter color than the darker color, just because depending on the season, that that execution of the design might fall back into the background. You may not see it as readily. So I would prefer a lighter color. If you decide not to do with the lime green and you consider a different color, that's fine. I think you would, consider some other lighter colors, but brown, I think, would fall back too much, and it sort of will be disguised by the organic foliage around the space. So I would prefer aesthetically a lighter color. But aside from that, I think it's a really beautiful concept, and I'm excited to see it come to fruition. And the other project, I was excited because it's similar in terms of the lighting and the lighting quality with a project that I'm familiar with at the Queen's Family Court in Jamaica, where they're hanging plexi pieces in the center of the steps or the stairways or escalator way. And I think that in that sense, if you want to sort of see how anchoring and hanging pieces could be successful, I think that's a good reference point. I do like your palette. I think it's a beautiful translation of your, from the person to landscape, and why this flower is, it's very intentional and it's translated beautifully. I would also, I liked when I saw the images of the several flowers instead of one. It becomes more organic. It becomes more sort of flowing within the landscape of that actual space. And I just was wondering if there was an opportunity to make smaller petals or more of these flowers. Would that translate as the ability to have less weight and to have things cascade vertically in a more in an interesting way as well? If I'm not sure if I don't want to design it for you. I'm just saying, if the weight is an issue, would breaking up the flowers into smaller flowers and having more of them offer you a different ability to I guess have more with smaller shapes? I don't know, but I think that the overall intention and the design and the palette are really beautiful, and I look forward to seeing how you resolve it.
Okay. Oh, please.
I really love both projects. I like how they're both indexical of, the community that's surrounding the rec center. For the first project, the flag, discussing color, I do like something lighter or green. One thing about the green, just in the, rationale slide, putting it next to the parks logo, I wonder if it becomes, not confused, but interpreted as a kind of like brand expression of the parks, which is, I'm not sure if that's what, this project should be, So I think there's a kind of signifier to the green for the parks that might, get melded with the flag in some ways. So I think that might be an argument against using like a lime green for this flag. And, I'd side with Mary too, in saying that like a lighter color or the brown actually, could work. That's my thought. And then for the second project, with the, the interior installation, one question I have is, there's different, clear, like I think 3 different sizes of the petals. And I wonder if that creates a sort of hierarchy. If you're tying individual faces to the specific petals, is there a kind of, there's like maybe 6 of like the orange ones and then a lot of the green ones. Is there an implied hierarchy that you might interpret from that? And if so, how would, you determine like which faces are applied to which colors and leaves?
Would you like to respond?
Sure. That's an interesting thing. I guess I hadn't really thought about it that way, because the bigger ones would theoretically be further away. But I guess could be thought about that way. I wasn't planning on including like a key, so you wouldn't actually know whose face it was. I was honestly planning on choosing it to try to juxtapose faces that were different shapes next to one another to sort of show a variety of face shapes. In fact, I don't even know that I was going to know whose face shape, like once I took the silhouette, I don't know that I was going to know whose face I was going to be putting somewhere. In terms of something, credit in general is actually something that would need to be discussed moving forward. Like when I did the project in Arkansas, when I collected them, one of the questions was, did you want to be credited like on the website, for example, or on the exhibition text for having submitted your face to the thing? So special thanks to people's names for donating their faces to this project, or donating their recipes, faces, stories to the project. But it didn't say like whose faces were there, or even, I don't even think it specified who donated a story versus a face. And so I don't know if that would be something that would just be on a website, be on any signage, or if that would even be anywhere on the thing, or if it would just be community. So that would kind of just, that would be a question moving forward, and what seemed appropriate for the project, and for that would be kind of a question for, I guess, maybe the core review group and some of the stakeholders. But yeah, that's kind of how I was seeing that.
Okay, if there are no other comments, I see no other comments. So we'll take a roll call vote now on installation of fabled ecosystem, item 28622. I note that commissioners raised the question of the color of the flag, which will be determined by the artist. And just to consider the implications of certain color choices, for example, green, that's the color of Parks logo. And the artist will also, we would ask the artist to consider the possibility of movement and kind of porosity, fluidity of the piece. So with that, I will call your name. When I call your name, please state your vote. Kenseth Armstead.
Approve.
Isabel Casilla. Approve. Bill Heinzen.
Approve.
Karen Keo. Approve. Manuel Miranda.
Approve.
Susan Morgenthau.
Approve.
Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approve.
I also approve. Let the record show that all are in favor and the project is approved. It's a very lovely project, Miguel. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mary Kelly Dalton would be so pleased. Okay, and now I'll take a roll call vote on installation of Through Thick and Thin, item 28623. I note that the main comments regarding your project have to do with the verticality of it, how it works in section with the volume of the stairs. So, and that will depend to some extent on the size and materiality. You'll be working through all that. Anything else, commissioners, that I should note about that? Okay. So I will now take a roll call vote on the installation of Through Thick and Thin, 28623.
I do want to say that it is
Yeah.
an important point that Manuel brings up about how it is that, first for equity, how it is that you select the people who do get, and the noticing how
Okay.
that gets in before you even figure out who goes where. And if by anonymity you deal with the fact that hierarchy could become a problem, that's one thing. But then still on the front end, figuring out how many people come in and where you notice so that you get equity and diversity before you go to make these likenesses, that is of note.
Okay, so we will add that to the record that, yeah, that there's Commissioner Mann. There's a request that you work through the question of who and how the profiles, and then the rest. Yeah,
It's just to figure out that, make a decision around that affirmatively, and she'll be able to make an answer to that. And then the rest of the comments have to do with the sectional relationship of the piece and the stairs. Yes, okay. And with that, we will vote on the installation of Through Thick and Thin, 28623, Ken Seth Armstead,
Approve.
Isabel Casilla,
Approve.
Bill Heinzen,
Approve.
Karen Keel,
Approve.
Manuel Miranda,
Approved.
Susan Morgenthau,
Approve.
Jimmy Van Bramer.
Approve.
And I also approve. So it's unanimous in favor of approval. Congratulations. I think Mary Kelly Dalton would be very proud to have the two of you memorialize her in this rec center. And with that, the public meeting is now adjourned.